أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثات بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ربي لا تؤاخذني مما يقولون واغفر لي ما لا يعلمون وجعلني خيرا مما يظنون. Amma ba'd. My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to another blessed day of Jumu'ah in the year 1445 after the Hijrah of Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And welcome to the House of Dua, the channel from which we learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about His creation, about His message, about His messenger, and of course, about His chosen religion, known as Al-Islam, and the channel from which we learn how to live and be happy in the world we live today, and how to return back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of accountability with even greater happiness and success. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, today we are commencing a series of presentations. A series of presentations designed to expose ourselves to the lessons we can learn from one of the most important surahs of the Quran, and that is Surah Al-Hujuraat. Surah Al-Hujuraat is chapter 49 of the Holy Quran. It's a surah like no other surah. It's a very short surah containing a total of 18 verses, but each of these verses contains enormous lessons for us in the world we live today. If all of us in the world today were to adhere to the lessons derivable from Surah Al-Hujuraat, the world would be a peaceful place for everyone. It's a surah that is meant to define code of conduct for us as believers, and in fact, the entire mankind. If everyone were to behave in conformity with the codes of conduct stated in Surah Al-Hujuraat, then there will be mutual respect, there will be harmony, there will be love for one another, there will be peace for all of us, and there will be unity of mankind. That's how important this surah is, my dear brothers, my dear sisters. We have considered it fit to bring the surah to you verse by verse. Therefore, in the next 18 presentations, we are going to focus squarely on the lessons we can learn from each verse of Surah Al-Hujuraat. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, I urge you to stay watching these presentations and share them with your family members and friends so that all of us can benefit from the lessons that can be learned from Surah Al-Hujuraat. What is Al-Hujuraat? Al-Hujuraat means the dwellings, the apartments, or the inner chambers. Each and every one of us live in homes. What goes on inside our homes? How we deal with one another in order for the home to be peaceful is what Surah Al-Hujuraat is all about. When you take your individual home, and you take your community as a home, and you take your country as a home, and we take the international community as a single unit of our homes, you can see how important Surah Al-Hujuraat can be to the entire mankind. But in the context in which the surah was revealed, it refers to these inner dwellings the private chambers or the apartments of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. It's important for us to state right from the onset that when you study the Quran carefully, you will find that whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to pass on important regulations and lessons for us, especially things that have to do with code of conduct, he used the personality of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam as a reference point, as an example. The reason is for all of us to derive that example from him as the final messenger, Afdalul Khaliq wa Akramul Rusul, the best of Allah's creation and the most honored of Allah's messengers. Copying from him will make us better people. That is why it's not sufficient to believe in Allah and follow the revelations of the Quran without also following the Sunnah of the Holy Prophet Muhammad as contained in the Hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Complying with the Quran and the Hadith makes you a complete Muslim, a guided human being, one whose life will be happy in the world we live today and whose life will be better and more successful on the day of accountability. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, Surah Al-Hujuraat drew the attention of the early Sahabas to how they should relate with the Prophet as they go in and out of his homes, so that the Prophet will receive some honor and dignity that he deserves from them. As a human being, he was pretty shy enough not to offend anybody. Therefore, he allowed some free movement in and out of his home. But this attracted the attention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the all-knowing and the all-merciful. He realized that they were not doing what was right. There needed to be some restraints in order for us to have harmony and peace and honor for those who are in authority, and especially the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. So he sent down these revelations, which now have universal application or universal applicability to all of us, because the lessons in the revelations of Surah Al-Hujuraat far now exceed what happened to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam as an individual and between him and the Sahaba of his time. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, Surah Al-Hujuraat is a surah like no other surah. We shall attempt to expose the merits of this surah, as well as the virtues and the application of these verses to the life of today, and why some of the difficulties we see in today's world can be explained from the point of view of our failure to adhere to the contents of these verses. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, Surah Al-Hujuraat is a surah from which you can learn so many things, including how to deal with those who are in authority over you, beginning from your parents inside the home, how to speak in the public, how to respect those you are addressing so that they too can respect you, how not to go ahead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all matters that you want to undertake. It's important for you as a believer to first of all find out what the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the example of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam are in respect of any issue before you make any decision. On Surah Al-Hujuraat, we will learn how to deal with conspiracy theories, fake news, and the dangers of those fake news. We will learn how to avoid being part of the rumor machine, the sinfulness involved in it. And we will learn how to resolve disputes between two or more people amongst us. Nowadays, Instead of helping to resolve conflicts, many people add to the conflict. We shall learn from Surah Al-Hujuraat how not to blackmail your fellow Muslim or fellow human being, how not to take advantage of the natural deficiencies or peculiarities of individuals, how not to turn them against the individual by mocking at the individual because of the nature of himself or herself. It's a sin to do so. And how not to suspect one another, how not to spy on one another, how not to bend down to look at what the other person is doing, how not to eat the flesh of your fellow human being, especially fellow Muslims. And more importantly, in today's world, how not to allow racism to drive us apart. And also, how not to pretend to be a believer when in fact inside you, the belief is not strong in you or is absent completely, or you are just hypocritically proclaiming the religion. And how not to think that being a Muslim, you are doing a favor to Allah and to the messenger. Indeed, it's Allah who has done a favor to you. It's important for us to realize all this. When we realize the totality of all this, then we build a harmonious society in which everyone is important. You don't look at fellow human being from the point of view of his worth financially or materialistically. You look at your fellow human beings from the point of view of humanity and the dignity Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in that human being, similar to the dignity placed in you. Surah Al-Hujuraat is a surah like no other surah. And dear brothers and dear sisters, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recommends for us to read this surah regularly, especially when you are in a state of anger. Read the surah, you will find calmness and tranquility from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It will help to save you from high blood pressure. It will help to save you from the development of stroke. It will help to save you from agony and undue stress, which are the problems we encounter in today's world. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, I cannot overemphasize the merits of Surah Al-Hujuraat. It's important for us to take a look at the circumstances in which this surah was revealed. That will help us understand the importance, the meaning, the application of this surah. The Prophet ﷺ began his mission in Mecca when he was commissioned a prophet in the year 610 AD. But unfortunately, it was not an easy assignment for him because of the resistance placed in his way by the people of Mecca, similar to the resistance people of today have towards Islam. So, things were not going well. Himself and the few people that believed in him were abused, stigmatized. Their properties were usurped. Their children were tortured. Their wives were raped. And they suffer all kinds of indignities in the hands of the mushrikun, the disbelievers, the idol worshippers of Makkah. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally ordered him to migrate from Makkah to Medina in 622 AD. On arrival in Medina, he found a fertile and peaceful ground to grow the religion. A new community of believers emerged, consisting of those who migrated from Makkah, known as the Muhajirun, and those who received them, who were the original inhabitants of Medina, who helped those who came from Makkah, known as the Ansar. But in addition to the Ansar of Medina and the Muhajirun that came from Makkah, there were also inhabitants in Medina, especially the natives of Medina at that time who were not Muslims. They were known as the Aus and the Khazraj. And apart from this, there were also the Jews and the Christians of Medina. So it was a conglomeration of people of different backgrounds that now began to come together as a new Islamic state. The task before the Prophet at that time, therefore, was how to weld together a new community of believers, community of loving people, harmonious people, God-fearing people, people who were ready to pull together for the success of themselves and others. That was a big task. This task was made even more important by the fact that these different groupings that I've just mentioned, who are coming together to form one society, they all came from different backgrounds with different behavior, with different conduct, and different values, and different preferences. How do we make sure, therefore, that they all live together? So let's come back to today's life. Take a look at where you come from. Let me use myself as an example. I am from a place in Nigeria known as Jagbe. Jagbe is a community of 4 villages. And these villages were founded by the 4 children of one man. But then, they live apart, separated by streams and rivers, but still, they are part of one bigger community. And even though they share commonalities, but they still have some differences. One of the major problems facing my community is how to pull together as one unit so that we can be united and be happy. We have been trying this for a long time. Alhamdulillah, to a very great extent, we are a highly united and harmonious community, and we ask Allah to make us better in that. What about you? Take a look at where you come from. It may not be different from what I've just told you about myself. Each and every one of us comes out of a community, and there are other surrounding communities with you. Thereafter, we find ourselves in a bigger local communities or local governments or counties. Then we find ourselves as a state, as a nation, then as an international community. We are all from different backgrounds. Even though we look alike, we have some preferences and different values. But how do we weld all this together in order for us to live as a harmonious and peaceful and loving and united world? This is why Surah Al-Hujuraat is still very important for us in today's life. My dear brothers, my dear sisters, I cannot overemphasize this. Surah Al-Hujuraat is a surah that is addressed specifically to the believers. But then the lessons go far beyond the believers. There are specific verses and surahs of the Quran that are addressed to the attention of the believers, you and I. Such surahs begin with the phrase, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu. In this surah, as short as the surah is, you will find that the phrase, Ya ayyuhallazina amanu, O you who believe in Allah, is mentioned 5 times out of the 18 verses of the surah. And equally mentioned in this surah so frequently is the phrase, Taqullah, be mindful of Allah. Be mindful of Allah, for your actions shall speak against you in front of Allah when you meet Allah on the day of accountability. And your actions can also make or unmake you in the life we live today. It's very interesting when you come to look at the provisions of Surah Al-Hujuraat and the demands and pressures of today's world. It's a surah that can help you bring peace to your family, to your community, to your nation, and to the entire world. That's how important it is. That's why many Mufassirun call it the surah of harmony and unity, the surah of the best code of conduct, good behavior towards one another. Today, I'm giving you the high points of this surah, why it's important, in order to prepare your mind for the verses that we shall be bringing to you beginning from next week, inshallah. I expect you to benefit from this presentation. And join me today to recite this surah. And inshallah, beginning from next week, we shall be coming to you one verse after another until we complete the entire surah. بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله واتقوا الله واتقوا الله إن الله سميع عليم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي ولا تجهروا له بالقول كجهر بعضكم لبعض أن تهبط أعمالكم وأنتم لا تشعرون إن الذين يغضون أصواتهم عند رسول الله أولئك الذين امتحن الله قلوبهم للتقوى لهم مغفرة وأجر عظيم إن الذين ينادونك من وراء الحجرات أكثرهم لا يعقلون ولو أنهم صبروا حتى تخرج إليهم لكان خيرا لهم والله غفور رحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين واعلموا أن فيكم رسول الله لا يطيعكم في كثير من الأمر لعنتم ولكن الله حبب إليكم الإيمان وزينه في قلوبكم وكره إليكم الكفر والفسوق والعصيان أولئك هم الراشدون فضلا من الله ونعمة والله عليم حكيم وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله فإن فات فأصلحوا بينهما بالعدل وأقسطوا إن الله يحب المقسطين إنما المؤمنون إخوة فأصلحوا بين أخويكم واتقوا الله لعلكم ترحمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا يسخر قوم من قوم عسى أن يكونوا خيرا منهم ولا نساء من نساء عسى أن يكون خيرا منهن ولا تلمزوا أنفسكم ولا تنابزوا بالألقاب بئس الاسم الفسوق بعد الإيمان ومن لم يتب فأولئك هم الظالمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعد الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلتكم من أعمالكم شيئا إن الله غفور رحيم إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله أولئك هم الصادقون قل أتعلمون الله بدينكم والله يعلم ما في السماوات وما في الأرض والله بكل شيء عليم يمنون عليك أن أسلموا قل لا تمنوا علي إسلامكم بل الله يمن عليكم أن هداكم للإيمان إن كنتم صادقين إن الله يعلم غيب السماوات والأرض والله بصير بما تعملون صدق الله العظيم وبلغ رسوله المصطفى الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. Inshallah, we shall bring you these verses one after the other, beginning from next week. Stay tuned with the House of Dua. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our living in this world peaceful, happy, united, and beneficial to all of us. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our return back to Him on the day of accountability even happier and more successful. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت الغفور الكريم سبحان الله وبحمدك سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك الحمد لله